In this week's Playing the Ball column, Martin Devlin takes aim at an egregious case of poor behaviour on the part of a player in the NFL in the US, and how he's recently been signed on a major contract anyhow. Martin joins me now, and Martin, a very forthright column. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, look, and when you say poor behaviour, look, I would, there's many adjectives I would use which are a lot stronger than that. We don't need to. I suppose people will read the column and get the feeling of it. Look, essentially what's happened here is a guy called Deshaun Watson, who was playing for a team called the Houston Texans, an NFL franchise side. His contract got put on hold for them as one woman after the other started coming out with these formal complaints, first to the police, and then they got together in a big civil suit. He had this, well, do I say habit? He had this perversion, I would call it more, where he would book massages with actual bona fide masseuses, like no one who actually worked in the sex industry. And this is the really predatory side of it and the really disturbing side of it. And then, of course, once he gets them into a room by themselves, he then makes these, and I quote, unwanted sexual advances, coercive sexual advances. I mean, whichever way you want to actually write this language, I think we're all adults enough to understand and know what's going on here. There's so many sick aspects to this. You've also got to remember that this guy's 6'4". He's about 280 pounds. He's a big man and a big intimidating man. And you kind of got the feeling after everything that you've read from the NFL and their investigation and things like this, that A, there was predatory behaviour, B, the coercion, and C, just, a guy that's, you got to remember this is a young guy, he's 23 or 24, that has no boundary ropes around him in terms of, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, or people telling him not to do things. And it's just it happens and gets thrown up quite a lot in the NFL. These are young men who get paid an extraordinary amount of money. This guy just signed a contract for 250 million US. That's over 5 years. That's $250 million US, okay? Work it out in New Zealand money, all of it guaranteed. Now, normally when they sign a contract, they'll guarantee some of it, but they guarantee absolutely every cent of it. And, I don't know what it's like to have that kind of money, and I don't know who else is watching knows what it's like to have that kind of money, but no one is saying no to you. And if somebody's saying no to you, then there's another fluffer or another PR person or another sycophant who's going to come along and say yes to you. And so I think that what happens with a lot of these guys, and if you go back through the NFL over a number of years, there's been double murders there. Some of the crimes that these guys are committing, the full gamut of crimes, and it just doesn't seem to be anyone actually in place that actually says, no, you can't do this. The NFL have a personal behaviour policy, and they've investigated under that policy. And I suppose what really has got me as far as why I've decided to write this column is that it comes down to, once again, what I was talking about a few weeks ago with FIFA and giving the World Cup to Qatar with all the bigotry that they espouse and everything else, is that money seems to talk in these situations, and any kind of ethics or any personal morality seems to walk. And I don't care who you are as a person, to be able to buy your way out of these things, there's just something wrong, inherently wrong with every aspect of that. And I hope that people understand, and I hope that people agree with me. When we get into a stage in our world and our society where, and look, Weinstein was like this, right? I mean, it's insidious. It's just another example of that, where Epstein, another guy who just thinks that money can buy him out of absolutely every situation. I suppose everyone's got a price, haven't they? And this guy, Deshaun Watson, has settled with 23 of the 24 women. None of these were going to get prosecuted because, again, it's that really awful situation of male sexual violence where a lot of it is he said, she said. And you got to look at the women that are involved. I don't know how frightening this would be, but I should imagine it would be really scary. This guy is deliberately picking on women who aren't in the sex industry, and then, that's pretty much what it's about. And the disgust, I feel, that he gets a 6-game suspension and then continues his career. And so what? The fans of the franchise? Oh, no, that's perfectly okay. The owners of the franchise? Oh, that's perfectly okay. Is it? I don't think it is.
Yeah, I'm surprised in the era of Me Too they wouldn't have more of an eye on the audience. I mean, in New Zealand, my understanding of the All Blacks and so forth is someone misbehaves, but the All Blacks brand want to reach out to children, to women. They want everyone on board with this brand, and they realise the damage that kind of thing would do. Is this not the case in the States?
Yeah, look, and I think that that it's a really good point to make. I think they do, and that the audience. Look, you've got to remember. I think last year something like 28 of the top 30 television programs in the US were NFL games. That's not playoff games. That's the power this entity has. It is so male dominated as well. Interesting that they got a female investigator. There's no way they would have put a male investigator on this. And now the NFL have appealed against that judgment. They wanted a year-long ban. I mean, I think this guy should be thrown out of the game for life. You know, there are certain things you give up your right to have the privileges that this gives you. And that's, in my mind, the fact that you can go on with your career. But the NFL is probably the worst at it. Look, if we were looking at the NBA, for example, and this was an NBA player, I doubt whether this guy would ever be playing NBA again, because the WNBA is a really powerful lobby group in their own right. And over the last few years, they have been recognised like that. Sure, they don't get the audience to generate the money, but those women have a really strong voice. There is no female equivalent as far as the NFL is concerned. So I think that's part of the reason they do get away with it. In terms of the audience, yeah, it's almost a 50-50 split in terms of women watching. But the NFL audience just seems to think, okay, you know, they're so desperate for wins or desperate for success that as long as this guy can pass and rush and throw a football, well, we'll forgive all that. Plus, of course, I think the danger element in American culture is that, you know, when none of this can be proved in court, you know, a lot of people could question how real is it in that case. And the fact that people will take compensation, again, how much does it affect them? I think those questions get asked. I think for a lot of the women involved, probably, no, they know they can't win in court. And also then they have to actually pay lawyers and, or, you know, go through the police prosecution service, which alone is as invasive as everything else. But the answer to your question, in short, no, they don't care. They just don't seem to care. I don't think that this will affect the Browns, their audience, their ratings, nothing, not a job. However, that doesn't stop people putting their hand up and saying, this is wrong. And that's what this column is. This is inherently wrong. It's the same as FIFA and Qatar. It is wrong. Can somebody just actually please stand up and say this is wrong?
Well, that's why I'm interested. Apart from yourself, and you obviously probably read sports media, but has anyone in the States pointed this out? I mean, the media are usually pretty much all over that. They have not. They just
not really
look the other way. Wow,
I've
that's
watched
amazing.
a lot of the programs, you know, and these are some of the women who are, you know, professionally employed to comment on the NFL. See, I don't know, you know, what their contracts say, what the stipulations are, how much they can really go at somebody like this. But yeah, that has been part of it as well. I mean, these are some really strong women. Mina Kimes is one of them who I really like. I mean, I would expect her to come out both fist flailing at this, but no, for some reason it's I don't know if it's accepted. It just seems to be that this is part of it, and no one seems to get too upset about it. Interesting that one of the women isn't allowing herself to be paid off yet. And so she's still actually got a civil case. 23 or 24 women came forward. There were 66 in all.
Wow.
So, you know, and the fact that the, you know, NFL has now turned around, this guy can't have private massages anymore, and they have to be supervised and they have to be selected by the Browns. I mean, all of this says guilt, but whether or not it's guilt in a court, well, does that make any difference? I mean, it should be, as an adult, people should be able to sit there and say, and make their own judgment about this and say, you're a creep, mate. I don't want you in my team anymore. You know, if this was an All Black, or if this was a Warriors player, or if this was a cricket or whoever, New Zealand would be in an absolute uproar. There's no way that, you know, sponsors on board should, for example, I would expect the NFL has these major sponsors, which aren't just directed at men, that they would be turning around going, hang on a second, half our audience is women. We don't want this stuff.
Yeah. That's right.
But somebody from New Zealand writing about this and shouting about this, I mean, it'll make no difference whatsoever. But at least the point is being made, and somebody's got to make it, don't they?